Okay. So like I said, when we first started out, I hope nobody's expecting to see a finished recipe book. Because when I read that today, I'm thinking, oh my God, I hope people aren't coming thinking I'm going to unveil a book that's done, because it's sure not done. It's just a starting idea. My name is Bob Snodgrass. I have a company called Net2 Community here in the Fox River Valley. Uh, Drupal Recipes is an initiative of the Fox Valley Drupal user group. And this, of course, is Drupal Chicago on the 7th. And here's my big idea that I just wanted to throw out there before we get started. A recipe is a guide that mixes ingredients up, or two mixed ingredients up, to create something really tasty. At least that's what we all hope, right? So when you do a recipe, you can always tweak it and make it better, but it's a good guide to be able to make sure that you're going to get a constant result, which is what we're all after. So little introduction about myself. I'm kind of a hands-on Drupal project manager. I heard cats. I used to have 5 of them. I only have none now, thank God, for a while. Clients, consultants, and people that work with me. And I founded the company in March of 2005. The whole idea at that time was to create a group-based system that would allow for protected areas for different community groups and to be able to share resources in the community. Probably, primarily around the idea of nonprofits, but also social service agencies and the like, so that they could share resources and everybody doesn't have to have all their own things. That was the idea. I couldn't find anybody that could actually do that for me, and I'm not a developer. So after a couple years of that, I decided I'm going to step back away from that idea because it's not going to work. And I'm going to pivot. And since about 2008, which of course is when we had all the fun with the big recession, I started working with Drupal as kind of the framework that was the closest, or had to me the best opportunity to be able to allow me to build something myself, because I figured that it would be difficult to get someone else to build it for me with the funding that I had, which was none at the time. So I started Fox Valley Drupal in January of 2009 as I was learning Drupal, and I've been doing Drupal ever since. And it's myself and Adrian McKee, who I don't think is on the call tonight yet. He may come in later on. And Marta Soderstrom, who does some office stuff and helps me with my CRM and things. And then I've got a number of consultants that I work with as well on different projects. So that's what I do. Disclaimer, when I put the description out for the meetup, I talked about maybe doing some things about, some weird ideas that I've heard over the years, and some challenging things, and some historical past experiences. And I thought, well, maybe I won't do that. Maybe we can do that later on. We can talk about some horror stories that we've all had to deal with or whatever. But I'm going to keep away from those kinds of things. And I don't have a book. There's no book. Sorry. There's lots and lots of books. There's lots and lots of resources. There's tons of videos. There's tons of all kinds of good Drupal resources out there. But I don't have them in my back pocket, and I'm not going to be the one to deliver that to the community. I'm just going to be the one to help kind of marshal that, maybe. I don't know. My hope for tonight is that maybe we can get more participation to save some future Drupal people the kind of pain and suffering that we've been through building Drupal sites over the years, because it is kind of a complex system, and we've all had our headaches with it. But it's also very powerful and very very forward-seeking and very extensible. So I'm sure that we'll be there in the future where we need to be. Speaking of pain, what the hell do I know? I don't know anything. I've just been around a while. Um, and I thought I'd share some of the recipes and some of the things that I've learned over the years, starting out as a Marine brat over in Quantico, Virginia. And in the second grade, I joined the swim team and I wanted to quit. And my dad told me, you know what? You get used to anything, even a sharp stick in the eye, just got to keep it up. He would use that saying all the time to me. And he'd also tell me that story in another way when things got a little tough and says, you know what? Um, it's better than the sharp stick in the eye. So he'd use it back and forth that way. So that's kind of where I came from. We moved a lot. I lived in 13 places by the time I was in the seventh grade. And so I got a chance to be able to make friends fast. I know what it means to be loyal to friends and to keep friendships up. And I also know what it means to let go and lose friendships as time goes on. And I know how to adapt and I know how to persevere. And those are kind of some underpinnings of Bob Snodgrass, I guess. Um, I also did a lot of camping and done a lot of backpacking and canoe camping and that type of thing. And I know how important it is to be able to keep things that serve more than just one purpose. You want to reuse things as much as you can. You want to save the weight. You want to use things over and over again. And that's a beauty of Drupal, because we can use tools in our toolkit in Drupal in a lot of different ways. Another thing that's kind of important to me, and I've always carried with me through my work life, is that wisdom is knowledge rightly applied. And that was taught to me early on in my career. And I've always gone back to that. Anytime I think, is this really the right thing to do? Is this really the right way to do this? I come back to that. Wisdom is knowledge rightly applied, to kind of do a double check and make sure that that's what I really want to do with this thing, or do I need to rethink it and do it a different way? I was also told you always want to look for the underlying concepts and those unshakable truths, because if you can learn those things and reapply it every time you learn something new, you're going to be quicker at learning that thing. Um, And this deserves a little bit of attention. That stands for money, membership, and manpower, or manpower, money, and membership. Either way you cut it, the membership part is your audience or your constituents, whoever you're trying to deliver things to. Your manpower, the people that work with you on it. And the money and the finances are resources that way that make it happen. And that if you're having problems with something, particularly in the engineering standpoint, they're usually a result of a failure in three different areas, one of three different areas, or maybe multiple of them. And that's people, data, and process, or your system. And I had another thought that I was going to bring up there, but I can't remember it. So we'll move on. That's enough about Bob. So I've carried all that kind of stuff through the historical side of things with me, with doing Drupal site building from 2008 till now. And we've gone through a lot of different things. We went to, from Flexit node on nodes to CCK to field API. We've gone from nodes and different things like your menus and your taxonomies and your blocks to having them all become entities. We've gone through a lot of different tool sets dealing with layout and display options, from blocks to display suite and panels and paragraphs and D8 blocks. D8 blocks being blocks on steroids from before, because you can reuse them and use them in different ways and put them in different places and all that kind of fun stuff. To display modes and view modes that allow us to be able to reuse things within the system different ways at different times, and layout builder now. So Drupal is a really complex and expansive kind of tool. And that's why, that's kind of the why um, we're going to do Drupal recipes, or we're doing Drupal recipes. In 2008, when I started, the resources were pretty limited. There were pretty much a couple of key books, the Drupal Pro Development in the first version, which was for 5, and Drupal, using Drupal, which was put together by Angie Byron and Addison Berry and Jeff Eaton and a bunch of those folks. Quick Sketch. Um, and now there's a second version that deals with Drupal 7. Those were the 2 main books. And if I were to point to one thing that's like Drupal recipes, it probably would be using Drupal, because that uses a bunch of different tools to be able to do a thing. Now we've got all kinds of additional things, a lot of new books, Drupal 8 Development Cookbook by um, uh, I'm losing the name, Matt Glayman, and a bunch of others that are out there, and all kinds of great documentation that we didn't used to have on D.O, but now the documentation is getting much better. So it's all out there. It's not great, but it's, it's a lot better than we used to have it, let me tell you. And now we've got a lot more groups. We've got a lot more camps. We've got a lot more opportunities. And now with Zoom and this time that we're in right now, we have the ability to be able to take advantage of those things. So why Drupal recipes? Well, it's because Drupal is still a really complex and kind of hard to understand animal. If you're not used to it, if you're new to it, it's quite different. And even when you go from the old stuff to the new stuff, there's a lot of differences in there. And that's why I think it's really important to do something like a Drupal recipes type of a thing. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And so we started talking about this out in Fox Valley area, and we decided that we wanted to, and maybe there's other things to this list, but we wanted to provide Drupal site builders with a starting point where they can go to start building things without having to go through everything. I remember back in the Drupal 4.7 days when I was doing my first Drupal site with organic groups and about 20 people in a club that I was delivering this to. And a lot of them were older, not computer literate folks. So it was a real challenge and to do those kinds of things. And I ended up reading through, as I'm learning Drupal, every stinking module listing that I could find. So I'd go to the module list on D.O and I'd start from the top and I'd go all the way down through, like, I think there were at that point about 27,000 modules. And I looked at each individual module page. And it was painful, but that was the best knowledge I could have gotten at the time out of it. And the idea here is to take and provide a grouping of those different tools so that somebody could actually build something. And that's what I love about that, using Drupal book, because that's exactly what it does. I wanted to not to be able to provide that repeatable guide so that when we're building something as a consultant, or whether we're building it for a different site or a new site, we don't have to go back and redesign and redefine the whole thing. We want to be able to take this recipe and go through the listing of it, go through the steps of it, and be able to ensure that we're going to get a result that we're looking for and not something that's a surprise. And that then once you've got that kind of framework there, you can extend it and make it sustainable. So, so that you're not putting something out there that's a one-off that you're going to go back to that site and say, oh my gosh, what the heck did I do here? I have no idea. You don't want to be in that kind of a situation. So that's part of the idea behind the Drupal recipes is to make it a documented set of steps. I didn't want to duplicate things that are already out there. There's a lot of great blog posts. There's a lot of great resources. There's a lot of great things that we can use for inspiration as we build these out. We ought to maintain those and keep that link there. But I want to make something that is going to be evergreen so that we don't have to worry about that blog post being updated, but the recipe that comes out of the idea for it can get updated over time, and we can check to make sure that it's actually a viable recipe still, that some new thing doesn't break something that was already there. And then eventually, when these things are good enough, we want to be able to contribute that back to D.O in some way, shape, or form. Don't know what that's going to look like yet. So again, this is kind of a concept. This is an idea right now that we're starting to get some legs on. The Fox Valley Drupal group is going to be working on this. It's going to be kind of like the hallmark of our monthly meetups that we do, where we'll take a piece and we'll build a recipe around that. And that'll help us from the standpoint of bringing community up and running on things and getting people to be knowledgeable about those recipes so that we can actually push them out and make them happen, and grow the Drupal experience in our group and in our community. Sorry about that. Let's try this. There we go. So what's the status of this thing? So thanks to Adrian McKee, who's done most of the work on foxvalleydrupal.org, which is where we have Drupal recipes at right now. He's done most of the building work on it, and he's been maintaining it. And Andy Olson, who's on our call with us tonight, he's been cheering us on and working with us on this. He's been on almost every one of our discussions about this thing. Will Long, who's helped us with the back end on Fox Valley Drupal so that we can keep it maintained. And he's been in a couple of conversations. And every time I have a question about how to go about doing something, I call Will, and it's over my head. And Ralph Kohler, who's also been involved in a lot of these conversations and contributed back to some of the recipes that we put out there, and certainly give us some good ideas. Hussein Webb, who I'm not sure, I don't think I know his actual name, but he was one of the guys that I first met on Drupal Camp Asheville Unconference, and he's been involved. Oops, sorry. I somehow got back off of that. Okay. I see Victor's coming on. Is somebody going to admit him? I can. There we go. So we created foxvalleydrupal.org about 4 months ago. We posted this link that's on the slide, Drupal recipes. I'll copy that and put it into the chat if I can find the dang chat. Where did it go? I'll get it out there. Sorry. But we posted that on the 11th. We had a planning meeting for the website on the 29th of June. And then we had, there was Drupal Camp Asheville. And I had this idea, and I didn't even want to really say anything about it yet because I kind of thought, well, that's pretty half-baked right now. We're not really ready to put it out there to the community yet. But I kind of took a chance and threw out the idea of Drupal recipes, and it was like the first one that they selected. And so all of a sudden, I'm having to talk about Drupal recipes off the top of my head. And it was really well received. Hussein Webb was in that, and he posted a BOF on DrupalCon about it. I was getting ready to go and post a BOF about it or look to see if there were some open time slots, and it was already there. So I thought, I'm going to go in there. And we had a whole bunch of people involved in that BOF, and it was really a cool experience because everybody thought it was a great idea. I don't know if it is or not, quite honestly. Maybe it won't go anywhere, but I think it's worth a try because it's something that I think we need. I think there's a hole there. So we started on DrupalSlack.com. There's a recipes channel out there. And I encourage anybody who's not been on that to go ahead and get on there if you have an interest. And then since then, we've had multiple presentations with Fox Valley Drupal about this. So that's kind of where it's at. The site is there. You can sign up for it. You will be able to post recipes yourself and start to develop them out. There's kind of a framework for it, and we'll talk about that as time goes on. Now is probably a good time to stop and ask if anybody's got any questions about what this is about or where we're trying to go with it.
Well, Bob, I don't really have a question, but I do. I know a lot where you're coming from. One of the hardest things that I found about learning Drupal and where Drupal recipes would have been great when I started working with it moons ago, was what you were talking about. Looking through 27,000 modules. How the hell do you do that? I mean, the one thing that I really don't understand about D.O is the fact that when you do a search for modules, you can't really hone in on something. I don't know if it's because the indexes aren't tagged properly or what have you, but you know, you do a search for some functionality, say, and you come up with 100 different modules, and maybe only 5 of them are really in the ballpark of what you did the search for. And it makes it very, very difficult to even get an idea of how to start adding on to your base Drupal installation to get the stuff you want to get done.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know what it is about Drupal search that's on D.O, and I'm not sure what the infrastructure really is, but I almost always end there, but don't start there. I always go to a Google search or a DuckDuckGo search or something like that, just because they seem to give me better results. And I get all the good blog posts and whatnot as well. So it helps a lot to start there, I think. But yeah, that's frustrating.
Hey, Bob, I'm wondering if these would tie in at all to like Drupal distros, or I don't even know if that's that much of a thing anymore or not because I've been out of it for a while. But you know, there's the distros that you can get that have kind of like the built-in
Yeah,
modules and you know, kind of give you like a working version of something for a blog or
right,
you know, an LMS or
right.
you know, whatever. Um,
I
is
considered I considered putting a slide in about different options on packaging those things up. And I didn't get to it, I guess, but distributions I've found anyway, there's some that are really good and they're great for putting up a sandbox for to go and look and see how they did something. But usually there's much more baggage in them than I care to have. And a lot of times, you, in the past anyway, whenever I've tried to use distributions, you have to wait till the maintainer of the distribution actually puts something out there before you're really confident that you can put something into your site and not break it. So that's been my hesitation with distributions.
Yeah, I have the same kind of feeling sometimes as some of the distributions that I've looked at in the past have been kind of, building a rocket ship to cross the road.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Rain is a new one that I'm itching to try. That's one that Media Current's putting together, and there's a lot of security stuff in that one, which looks very promising, but I haven't had the time to actually do it and play around with it. But anybody else have anything real quick? So going once, going twice, moving on. Development and hosting. So our foxvalleydrupal.org is a GitLab project repo. And Will Long helped us get the GitLab CI and CD running. So when we put up a new feature branch, we tag it with an M dash the feature branch name, and that creates a whole nother multi-dev instance on Pantheon, which is where we've got our site hosted. Pantheon's providing that to us for free as a community project, which is awesome. So it doesn't cost us any money. And we've got config sync set up so that we can put things out there and make additions on content type or whatever we've got and be able to push it out and not have to lose any groundwork on the content posting. Content can move on, people can log in, they're continuing to move on with the system. And the multi-dev environment allows us to be able to do hot fixes on any security things that happen. And so because we've got it set up the way that we do, we're open and encouraging to having people who understand that whole scenario to be able to contribute. If you've got something that's a build component on foxvalleydrupal.org that you want to pull down and create a new feature branch, define it and push it up and get it ready for a merge request, we can handle that kind of thing and be able to take a look at what you're putting out there and make sure it's going to play nice with the rest of the site as we push it out. It's a Drupal 8 site right now because Pantheon's not directly supporting Drupal 9 yet. And we're using the Olivero theme as the base theme. We've got our own Fox Valley Drupal or Fox Valley sub theme that works with that base theme. So that's kind of the structure that we've got for the site. This is kind of our content architecture. We've got these two content types that are primarily driving things. We've got a recipes content type, which is actually the recipe that everything ties back over to. We've got a supporting organization, which right now is very, very brief, that's out there so that we'll be able to tie back a, let's say your company's organization information or your library or your nonprofit or whatever it is you're doing. You can identify that organization as the group that's supporting your recipe or helping to support that recipe. The people are tied to the recipes, so they're tied with regard to who the participants are on a recipe, or the supporting organization, and there can be multiple on a recipe, is tied over to the recipe as well. We have a scenario where, of course, we've got a title for the recipe. The objective as far as what are we doing with that recipe. If there's any blog posts or source documentation, like say using Drupal chapter 4 was inspired that recipe, you could put that in as well on a recipe. We've got different recipe types, and you see that that's a taxonomy item. So we come over here and we can take a look. So right now, our major type of recipes are parent, child, industry, market, upstream, profile, or distribution. So they can be tagged in different ways so that they can tie back to some of these other kind of components that are out there. So we're trying to make this as simple as we can to have a simple unit of measure that's kind of our core content type, but yet it's tied back to these things. So we could look, for instance, look easily for all the distribution recipes or all the profile recipes, etc. And they can also relate back to one another. So a parent and a child, this recipe type is also used as a conditional field, so that if the recipe is a parent, it would come up with a field that would allow us to see all of the childs, or if it's maybe it's the other way around, a child, and that would come up with which is the parent recipe down here. So we can tie those kinds of things together. If a recipe doesn't exist yet, we're just building this out and we've got our outline and we've got our titles for the recipes, it's going to allow that to be created off of this child recipe if we want to create a new parent one, for instance. We've got some thought that we put into how we've built this thing so that hopefully it will be a little more extensible. But if you think about architecting something like this, a recipe that could fit in a lot of different ways, how do you really do that? I don't know. We don't know what we're going to have yet. We don't really know what our experience is going to be yet. So we're just trying to be as flexible as we can. There's a status, which is, whether or not it's going to be, this is in evaluation, or it's an idea. We're going to talk about it. It might not ever become a real recipe. The Drupal version, major and individual, so that we can tag it to whether or not it's a D7 or a D8 or a D9 or where it was last tested at, we can tie it to that. This notes area here, and we're probably going to have additional areas of these different types of notes. That's actually a separate ECK entity type, which has a description and a link in it. Link being not just your URL, but also a title for that link, so that you can tie it to other things. So if you're researching something and you find a good module, sorry folks, jumped off the slide, and you find a good module, you can link over to that other module that might be something you want to look at as you're researching it. You're looking for module options that you might use in this recipe that you're building. And then your steps to build, again, are kind of like, these are individual steps, and they're all also notes. We've got optional steps. They're all also notes. So we can use those notes in multiple places. Then we've got a conclusion, place for that supporting organization, who are the people that are working on this project, different media, and I don't know if you folks are seeing my little doodad down here, but it's kind of messing with me right now. Sorry, there we go. Your related recipes, so we can relate recipes with one another as well. And then recipe tags, which right now are simply that, tags that can be tied to different things. So that's kind of the structure that we've got out there, and I can show through this a little bit when we get to that point, but that's the kind of idea we've got. We're trying to keep it simple, but yet have it be extensible enough that we can build on top of it, like most good recipes should have, I guess. What's next? I'm going to leave it to you folks what we do next here. just look at my slides real quick, refresh my memory. So what's next is I'm going to promote that people go in and actually create their accounts on Fox Valley Drupal. And once you're on there and you've got your account created, we'll make sure that you've got the proper roles to be able to create a recipe so you can create your recipe content. There's some site adjustments that we're going to be doing between now and the 21st, I think it is. We're having our next Fox Valley Drupal meeting. And I want to have it done by then. But we're going to have some kind of automated role assignment for new users and do some minor changes to the recipes and the supporting organizations, and possibly get a user dashboard kind of a scenario put in place as well. And then we're looking to solicit more ideas and participation in this idea. And with that, we're talking to some other user groups. There's a number of other user groups that we've had some conversations with through the BOFs and the Asheville unconference piece. So we're going to be doing some individual promotional things there to get some other folks involved with this whole thing. Our next, I noticed this tweet a day or so ago, maybe the 6th. And I don't know Mark Van Gend, but he has a good point here. You know, we've got, okay, here's D.O's picture on this documentation page, and we've got official guides, and we've got a community guides. What's the difference? I don't know. And there's, as I understand it, there is a difference. There's a little bit more moderation and vetting of the things that become components or content within the official guides than the community guides. But, you know, Drupal recipes could be part of this community guides piece, or maybe some contribution to it at some point. And so one of the things that we're going to do in the near term for the 21st, our meetup on the 21st, is that we're going to we're going to go through and we're going to look at the structure of documentation on D.O and talk with some of the documentation folks to find out how can we help and how can we contribute and how can we be involved and how can we relate some of the content, which on our site is not going to be, you know, it's going to be half-baked, some of it, you know, pretty half-baked at first. And it may work, it may not. It, you know, it's going to be not something someone's going to be able to hang their hat on right away, but we want to be able to have those kinds of discussions. And when they get to the point when they're good enough to throw up on D.O as part of the community or the official guides, we want to be able to do that. So that's our next step, and that's going to be the topic of our meeting on the 21st. How do we plug into the Drupal community as far as documentation is concerned? So that's all I got, folks. Now we're in discussion and resources, and I'm going to stop this presentation, and I'm going to drag this down.
Should we stop the recording, Bob?
Yeah, sure.
All right.